The pressure to act quickly in an unfair situation feels like a physical weight, a tightening in the chest that whispers of danger and demands immediate response. It is the first and most visceral cost of injustice, this internal alarm that screams for motion, for reaction, for some visible proof that you are not simply accepting the blow. We mistake this feeling for weakness, for a failure of courage, when in truth it is the system's first and most elegant trap. The real cruelty begins not with the act of unfairness itself, but with the psychological environment it creates. One that rewards the appearance of speed and punishes the reality of patience. Consider the moment you are wronged. Perhaps a credit is stolen at work, a promise is broken without consequence, a position you earned is given to another with louder claims. The immediate landscape is not one of snow and locked doors, but of stifled air and the cold touch of polished dismissal. The injustice is in the quiet, in the way your protest is met not with argument but with a smooth, practiced silence that suggests your very perception is the problem. This is the modern casting out. You are not left in the woods with sawdust bread, you are left inside the walls with a role made of nothing, expected to perform emptiness with a smile. The hunger is for recognition, the cold is the chill of being strategically overlooked, and the locked door is not behind you, but in front of every path to redress, labeled with procedures that favor those who already hold the keys. The villain in this story did not rush, their mistake was believing you would. They counted on that tightening in your chest, on the societal script that says a good victim fights back immediately or forever holds their peace. They prepared for your confrontation, your emotional outburst, your demand for a meeting or a public accounting. They had rehearsed their defenses for that. What they did not prepare for was your stillness. What they could not comprehend was that your delay was not paralysis, but perception. While they waited for the storm, you were learning the weather. You were noting the patterns of the breeze through the office, the specific scent of anxiety that clung to certain documents. The exact sound a lie made when it left your superior's mouth, a slight rasp, a fractional pause where truth should have been. This is the information gathering that folk justice encoded in its oldest bones. The powerless cannot afford the luxury of the first move, for the first move reveals your position, your resources, your emotional state. It gives the powerful data. Your silence, your apparent acceptance, becomes a shield. Behind it, you are not idle, you are conducting an audit. You are mapping the flows of power not as they are presented in the handbook, but as they actually function. Who speaks to whom after hours? Which projects get funding without question? Whose mistakes vanish like smoke? This work is slow, it is meticulous. It feels in the moment like doing nothing at all, and that feeling is the second great cost, the erosion of your own sense of agency. You begin to doubt yourself. The voice that demanded action now turns inward and asks if you are just afraid, if you are justifying cowardice with strategy. This is the trap within the trap. To resist it requires a fundamental reframing. You must see patience not as the absence of action, but as a specific type of action. It is reconnaissance. It is intelligence gathering. It is letting the enemy believe they have won the first skirmish, so they grow comfortable, so they make the mistake of believing their own fiction of control. The gluttonous villain, the boss, the rival, the unjust system, consumes your silence as if it were a tribute. They grow fat on it. Their greed is not just for your labor or your credit, but for your compliance, for the narrative that they are unchallenged. This is their weakness. Speed signals a need for resolution, a hunger for closure that can be exploited. Patience signals a different hunger, one for understanding. And understanding, in any unequal conflict, is the only real weapon you can forge that they cannot take away, so the story does not begin with banishment. It begins with a choice made in a quiet room, the choice to feel the full weight of the pressure to rush, to acknowledge its scream in your blood, and then to deliberately, consciously, decide to listen instead to the quieter sound of your own observing mind. The cost is high. It is the cost of enduring the injustice without the immediate relief of reaction. But the alternative cost, the cost of rushing in with half-understood facts and raw emotion, is to play the game on the villain's terms. On the board they designed with the pieces they allotted you. The first chapter of any real victory is therefore written not in action, but in the disciplined, painful, essential act of waiting and watching. Let us ground this theory in a specific place, in a specific set of senses. Imagine a workshop, not a forest. The air is thick with the smell of old wood dust and linseed oil, a scent that has settled into the grain of the floorboards over decades. This is where our protagonist works, or rather, where they are permitted to occupy space. Their injustice is not a dramatic exile, but a slow erosion within the walls. They are the one who arrives first, when the morning light is still grey and cold through the high windows. They feel the rough grain of the workbench under their palms, familiar as their own skin. They hear the specific creak of the third step on the stairs, a sound that means the foreman is arriving, his boots heavy with assumed authority. The cruelty here is in the withholding. It is in the project completed with hands that now bear the faint, shiny scars of small burns and nicks, only to have another's name spoken at the meeting. It is in the tool they sharpen to a perfect edge being taken from their bench without a word, returned dull and flecked with someone else's careless work. It is the loaf of bread made of sawdust, but here the sawdust is mixed into the very praise they are denied, into the opportunities that are mentioned just within earshot and then given to another. The cold is not of snow, but of a calculated indifference that chills the room more effectively than any draft. The protagonist moves through this environment with a quiet that could be mistaken for defeat, but look closer, watch their hands. When they sand a piece of wood, they do not rush. They work with the grain, their touch firm and consistent, feeling for the moment the surface becomes truly smooth under the paper. They listen to the conversations that happen over their head, not for the words, but for the rhythms. They learn that the foreman's voice takes on a wheedling tone when speaking to the owner's nephew, a different, harder clip when addressing the old joiner in the corner. This listening is a skill. It is the bleeding fingers of this trade. The pain is not in the flesh, but in the mind, in the discipline of absorbing insult and unfairness without letting it twist your focus. The smell is not of a magical broth, but of the simple, honest things they control. The scent of beeswax they use to polish their own tools, the clean smell of pine shavings from a piece fitted perfectly, without gap or strain. Their survival is in these small perfections, in the integrity of the work that cannot be taken from them because it exists in the object itself. And here, in this place of polished neglect, an ally appears. Not a woodcutter in a fairy tale, but the old joiner in the corner, the one everyone else considers too slow, too set in his ways. He has been watching too. One afternoon, when the workshop is empty save for the dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, he speaks. His voice is like the rasp of well-used sandpaper. He does not offer comfort or grand plans. He points to a dovetailed joint on a drawer the protagonist is assembling. A tiny flaw, invisible to anyone not looking for it. He shows with his own gnarled hands how to correct it. This is the aid. It is not a magical gift. It is the transmission of a standard, a quiet insistence that the quality of the work is the only true territory you can claim. The helper aids them because he recognizes the same quiet virtue in them, the refusal to let the shoddiness of the environment infect the work itself. This chapter is not about building a castle in the woods. It is about noticing the exact temperature at which the glue sets best in this damp room. It is about knowing which chisel holds its edge longest and why. It is about the touch of a well-planed board, cool and flawless as still water. It is the sound of your own breath, steady, while chaos and claim and credit swirl around you. This is the grounding. This is where the theory of patience becomes a practice. It happens not in the mind alone, but in the muscles of the hands, in the focus of the eyes, in the refusal to let the injustice make you careless. For carelessness is what the unfair system expects. It wants your work to decline, your attitude to sour, your hand to slip so they have a reason, a justification for the cruelty. By maintaining your skill, by tending to it in secret like a small, vital flame, you deny them that. You are gathering information, yes, but you are also gathering yourself. Each perfectly set joint, each smoothly sanded curve, is a brick in a wall they cannot see. You are building a refuge not of stone, but of competence. And in that quiet space, with the smell of honest wood and wax in the air, the pressure to rush begins to lose its power. It becomes a distant noise outside the walls of your focus. The real work, the survival, has already begun. Now we connect the personal struggle to the cultural machine that created it. The pressure our protagonist feels is not random, it is manufactured. Society rewards visible action. It celebrates the quick decision, the rapid pivot, the overnight success. This cultural script is the trap the villain will later fall into, but first, it is the environment that makes the protagonist's patience so difficult. Look at the language we use. We speak of seizing the day, of striking while the iron is hot. Hesitation is framed as weakness, deliberation as indecision. This is not ancient wisdom. This is the language of markets, of competition, of a world that mistakes motion for progress. The system is addicted to speed because speed creates data points, metrics, the illusion of control. A quick reaction can be measured, analyzed, and more importantly, it can be commodified. Patience cannot. Patience is quiet. It yields no immediate metrics. It looks like nothing is happening. And in a society that values productivity above all, looking like nothing is happening is a cardinal sin. This is why the unfair boss, the gluttonous system, expects a reaction. They are not just counting on your anger. They are counting on you believing the cultural story that says you must respond, and quickly, to prove your worth. Your worth in their equation is tied to your reactivity. When you delay, you break the script. You create a narrative vacuum. And nature and human systems abhor a vacuum. They must fill it. So the villain, confused by your stillness, will eventually rush in to fill that silence themselves. This is the first critical connection. The societal pressure for speed creates the exact conditions where patience becomes a devastating weapon. But only if you understand the mechanism. The mechanism is about attention economies. In any unfair situation, there are two battles. The battle over the material thing, the credit, the position, the resource. And the battle over narrative, the story of what is happening, who is right, who is strong. The powerful almost always win the narrative battle first. They control the terms. They say the meeting was productive. They say the decision was difficult but fair. They say your concerns are noted. These are incantations. They are spells cast to shape reality. A quick, emotional confrontation from the powerless plays directly into this. It lets them frame your response. See how emotional they are. See how they can't handle professional disagreement. Your speed gives them material to work with. Your patience denies them that material. It forces them to sit in the narrative they've created, without your reaction to distort it or justify it. They are left alone with the hollow sound of their own words. This is profoundly unsettling to systems built on constant feedback loops. Now, scale this up. This is not just about one workshop or one office. This is about cultural systems of justice and conflict resolution that have been slowly rewired. Modern grievance procedures, public relations, even legal frameworks are often designed to manage speedy reactions. They have protocols for complaints, for lawsuits, for public outcry. These protocols are labyrinths. They are meant to absorb your energy, to translate your specific pain into their generic forms, and to exhaust you. They are traps baited with the promise of speedy resolution. The folk wisdom in the old tales understood this. The tales where the hero is given impossible tasks or sent on a long journey are not just about hardship. They are about forcing a delay, about taking the conflict out of the villain's immediate court and into a different kind of space. A space where different rules apply. The personal choice to be patient then is a small-scale secession. It is the decision to withdraw your participation from the narrative battle on the terms offered. You stop feeding the system with the reactions it expects. This creates a dissonance, and in that dissonance, cracks appear. You might notice that the foreman who is so confident in meetings stumbles when asked a technical question he cannot bluff through. You might see the memo full of bold claims is built on data that doesn't quite add up. These are the cracks. They were always there. But you needed the quiet, the space created by your own patience to see them. The societal layer shows us that the pressure to rush is not a personal failing to overcome. It is a systemic feature to be recognized and strategically bypassed. The villain's eventual mistake will be to assume the societal script is reality. They will believe that because everyone values speed, speed is strength. They will rush into the vacuum your patience creates, and they will do so using the same blunt, quick tools that society has taught them are effective. They will overreach, they will make a promise they can't keep quickly to look decisive, they will sign a contract they haven't read to show momentum. They will claim credit for an unstable foundation to appear productive. Your patience allowed you to see the instability. Their societal conditioning will compel them to ignore it. The connection is now clear. The personal cost of patience fights against a cultural tide. But that same cultural tide, when understood, becomes the current that will pull the villain onto the rocks. You are not just waiting. You are using their own world's rules as the trap. You are letting the cult of speed turn against its most devout follower. Let us now descend into the specific systems our protagonist learns during their period of disciplined waiting. This is not passive observation. It is active, systematic study. The information-gathering phase has a structure, a methodology. First, they map the resource flows. In the workshop, this means understanding where the wood comes from, which supplier is reliable, which deliveries are consistently late or of poor quality. They note which tools are frequently borrowed and never returned, tracing a pattern of casual theft that weakens the overall capability of the shop. They learn the financial rhythms when invoices are sent, when payments are chased, the slight panic in the air at month's end. This is economic intelligence. Second, they chart the social hierarchy, but not as presented on an organizational chart. They map the real hierarchy. Who defers to whom not out of title, but out of fear? Who holds influence because of personal relationship, not skill? They listen for the alliances, the grudges, the small debts of favor that function as a shadow currency. The old joiner, for instance, might be low in the formal hierarchy, but the foreman never interrupts him. That is data. Third, they study the communication systems. How are decisions actually made? Is it in the official meeting or in the quiet conversation afterward by the coffee machine? What language is used to obscure failure? Phrases like lessons learned, moving forward, aligning expectations. These are systemic smoke screens. The protagonist learns to listen past the words to the gaps between them. They begin to recognize the specific tone of voice that precedes a broken promise, the particular smile that masks contempt. This study is work. It requires the same focus as planing a board to perfect flatness. You must hold your attention steady. You must not let emotional reaction cloud your perception. The cost of this work is exhaustion of a peculiar kind. It is the fatigue of constant, low-grade vigilance. It is the strain of maintaining two realities in your mind, the official story of how things work, and the actual machinery you are documenting. This systemic layer reveals the true architecture of the unfair situation. Most injustice is not a single malicious act. It is the output of a poorly designed or deliberately exploitative system. The villain, the foreman, the unfair boss is often just a component in this system, though they benefit from it. They may not even understand the full mechanism, they just know which levers to pull for their own gain. By studying the system, the protagonist does something radical. They stop seeing the villain as an all-powerful individual and start seeing them as an operator within a structure. This changes everything. It depersonalizes the conflict in a healthy way. The anger, which is natural and justified, can now be channeled. It is no longer just he is against me. It becomes he is using these specific systemic flaws to his advantage. And if they are flaws, they can be understood. If they can be understood, they can be anticipated. If they can be anticipated, they can be used. This is the core of the trap that will be set later. The trap will not be built from personal vengeance, but from systemic logic. It will use the rules, the flows, the pressures of the system itself against the one who abuses them. For example, the protagonist might learn that the foreman is under pressure from above to show cost savings. He achieves this by using cheaper, warped wood for certain projects and pocketing the difference. The system rewards the visible cost saving. It does not adequately check for the hidden cost, the structural weakness, the customer complaints that come later. The protagonist, through patient observation, learns the specific supplier of this bad wood, the delivery schedule, even the invoice coding used to hide it. They do nothing with this information yet, they simply file it away. Another system they might learn is the performance review process. They document every instance of their work being claimed by another. They keep copies of their original designs, timestamped. They note the promises made and broken. They are building a parallel, truthful record of events that exists outside the official, sanitized narrative. This record is a weapon, but a very specific one. It is a systemic weapon. It is made of data, of timelines, of contradictions that only become visible when laid side by side. The villain, operating on speed and assumption, believes the official narrative is reality. They believe their own manipulated reports. They have forgotten the details, the small lies, because they moved on to the next quick win. The protagonist has not forgotten. They have the receipts, in the most literal and metaphorical sense. This deep dive into systems is what separates strategic patience from mere suffering. Suffering is endured. Patience of this kind is applied. It is a directed energy. The protagonist is not waiting for rescue. They are conducting an audit. They are a one-person investigative committee, gathering evidence not for a courtroom that may never convene, but for their own precise understanding. And with that understanding comes a quiet, terrible power, the power to predict. When you know how a system works, you can predict how it will fail. You can see the stress points. You can identify which piece of shoddy work, which rushed decision, which overclaimed credit, is the loose thread. When pulled at the right time, with the right pressure, the whole garment may unravel. But that pull must be timed perfectly. It must come not from anger, but from calculation. It must come when the system's own logic demands it. That time is not yet. For now, the work continues. The smell in the air is still dust and oil, but now it is also the scent of information, of patterns recognized. The sound is not just the workshop noise, but the quiet click of another piece of the puzzle settling into place in the protagonist's mind. The touch is the feel of the real, hard edges of the system, mapped in darkness, waiting for the light. Let us return to the workshop, to the quiet rhythm of hands at work. The air carries the scent of fresh pine shavings now, a clean, sharp smell that cuts through the older odors of dust and neglect. This is the smell of the protagonist's skill, of work done right. Their fingers move with a certainty that was not there before. They are not just observing systems now, they are mastering their craft within them. Watch as they select a piece of ash wood, its grain straight and true. They run a thumb along its length, feeling for any hidden twist. The touch is diagnostic. They set it on the bench, the wood cool and solid. The sound of their work is a language. The steady rasp of the plane taking long, thin curls, the crisp tap of the mallet on a chisel cutting a mortise. The soft whisper of sandpaper moving with the grain, each sound is precise, unhurried. This is the quiet virtue made audible. The bleeding fingers in this story are not literal wounds, but the calluses of repetition. The slight ache in the joints at the end of a day, spent in focused tension. It is the cost of competence, willingly paid. The protagonist is building something, but it is not for show. It is a small cabinet, destined for a corner of the workshop to hold the precious, sharp tools. Every joint is hand-cut, every surface brought to a satin finish. It is an act of defiance. In a place that rewards speed and shoddiness, they are creating an object of slow perfection. The smell of the broth, in this context, is the linseed oil they warm to polish the wood. It has a deep, earthy, almost nutty scent that fills their immediate space. It is the smell of care, of preservation. As they work, the old joiner watches from his corner. He says nothing for a long time. Then, one afternoon, he brings over a small, worn block of exotic wood, its color a rich, dark brown. For the pulls, he says, his voice rough, draw pulls. It will feel warm in the hand. This is the helper's aid deepened. It is not just correction now, but contribution. He gives from his own small hoard of quality materials, recognizing that this cabinet is not just furniture, it is a statement. It is the protagonist claiming territory through excellence. The protagonist accepts the wood with a nod. They do not speak of gratitude in words, they speak it in action. They spend extra time shaping the draw pulls, carving them so they fit perfectly in the palm, so their edges are smooth and inviting to the touch. This collaboration, this silent exchange of standards, is the foundation of a different kind of system. The stray dog in this tale is not an animal, but the quality that everyone else has abandoned. The protagonist and the old joiner are feeding it, sheltering it. And in return, it gives them a quiet strength. The cabinet, when finished, is a beautiful, simple thing. It sits solidly on the floor, its doors opening and closing with a satisfying, muted click. The drawer slides smoothly on runners the protagonist fashioned by hand. It is a tool for tools, a brain for the hands. It represents order wrested from chaos, clarity maintained in confusion. The foreman walks by it one day, he stops, he runs a hand over the top, his touch careless. Nice enough, he says, his tone dismissive. But his eyes linger a moment too long. He sees the quality, he cannot help but see it, and in that seeing, a seed of want is planted. Not appreciation, but possession. The protagonist simply continues. They place their sharp chisels, their calibrated squares, their best planes into the cabinet. The smell of the oiled wood mingles with the scent of sharp steel. The sound is the soft thud of the drawer closing, a sound of completion. This chapter is about grounding in the physical world. The theories of patience and systems are necessary, but they are air. This is the earth. The feel of the wood, the smell of the oil, the sound of a well-fitted joint. This is where the protagonist lives, in the realm of what is real and well made. It is their sanctuary. The pressure to rush, the unfairness, the mapped systems, they all exist outside the circle of light around this bench. Inside that circle, there is only the next cut, the next sanding, the next moment of focused attention. This is how they survive. The peace in this chapter is hard, won and temporary, but it is real. It is in the cool, smooth surface of the finished cabinet door under their palm. It is in the quiet pride that needs no audience. It is in the knowledge that they have not let the environment corrupt their hands. Now we step back, far back, to see the pattern etched in time. The protagonist's quiet strategy is not an invention. It is a rediscovery. Across the long arc of human survival, impatience has been the great killer, not of individuals alone, but of armies, of empires, of civilizations. Consider the historical record. A general, pressured for a quick victory, commits his forces across a river before securing the far bank. The current is swift, the enemy prepared. What was meant to be a decisive strike becomes a rout. The cost is measured not in minutes of frustration, but in thousands of lives. In the fall of a city, the haste was a signal. It signaled a lack of information, a lack of respect for the terrain, a desperation that the enemy could smell on the wind. Or consider the farmer in a time of drought, watching his crops wither. The societal pressure is to do something, anything. To pray for rain, to sacrifice, to dig new wells in a frenzy. But the farmer who has studied the land, who knows the deep aquifers and the patterns of past droughts, waits. He conserves his seed, he repairs his tools. He does not plant in dust simply to be seen acting. His patience looks like surrender. But when the rains finally come, however faintly, he is ready. His neighbors, who acted in haste, have exhausted their resources. They have nothing left. This is the old survival logic. Speed signals a deficit. It signals that you are operating from a position of weakness, of incomplete knowledge, of fear. Patience signals a surplus. It says you have enough time, enough understanding, enough internal resources to wait for the right moment. Folk tales are the distilled memory of this logic. They are not childish fantasies. They are historical reports from the front lines of powerlessness. The third son who is patient while his arrogant brothers rush in and are devoured. The wise animal who outlasts the stronger, quicker predator by knowing the terrain. The servant who endures cruelty until the master's own habits trap him. These stories were repeated not to entertain, but to instruct. They were survival manuals for people who had no legal recourse, no political power, no wealth. Their only weapon was time, and the wisdom to use it. The villain in our workshop story is reenacting a historical era. He is the general at the river. He is the farmer planting in dust. His need for quick validation, for visible dominance, is a profound historical weakness. It is the weakness of every colonizer who overextends, every tyrant who must constantly prove his strength, every speculator who buys at the peak of a frenzy. They move quickly because they are afraid, afraid of being seen as weak, afraid of losing what they have stolen, afraid of the quiet that might allow people to think. The protagonist, by choosing patience, is aligning with a deeper, older current of human success. They are the general who scouts every path. They are the farmer who reads the soil. Their weapon is not confrontation, but chronology. They understand that time is not just something to pass. It is a medium in which truth precipitates, lies, shoddy work, inflated claims. These are unstable compounds, they decay, they fall apart. But they need time to do so. Rushing to expose them often just gives them a new coat of paint. Letting them sit in the open air of their own consequences is what makes them crumble. This historical layer connects the personal to the eternal. The pressure you feel to act fast in an unfair situation is the same pressure a soldier felt before a doomed charge. It is the same pressure a peasant felt to rebel before the harvest was in. The folk wisdom encoded in tales says resist that pressure. Not with defiance, but with a deeper kind of action. Gather information. Let the enemy's momentum become their liability. In the grand historical view, the villains are often those who won the battle but lost the war. They seized the castle but could not hold it because they did not understand the land or the people. They claimed the treasure but could not spend it because it was cursed by their own method of acquisition. Their speed was their initial advantage and their ultimate undoing. Our protagonist's workshop is a microcosm of this. The foreman's quick claims, his rushed projects, his stolen credit, they are a small-scale empire built on sand. It looks solid, it functions for a time. But it has no deep foundation. The protagonist's patience is the groundwater, slowly, inexorably undermining that sand. They are not attacking the empire. They are simply remembering how to build on stone. This integration is crucial. It tells us that the feeling of being alone in your patience is an illusion. You are in a long line of people who chose the slower, harder, wiser path. You are using a tool that has been tested for millennia. The folk justice that rewards patience is not a moral fairy tale. It is a historical observation. Systems that reward haste tend to collapse. Individuals and cultures that cultivate patience tend to endure. The conflict in the workshop is not just a personal grievance. It is a skirmish in the ancient war between two ways of being in the world. The way of the quick harvest and the way of the slow root. The protagonist has chosen the root, and roots, in time, break stone. We must now turn our attention fully to the villain's mind, not as a monster, but as a psychological system. His need for quick validation is the engine of his eventual mistake. It is a hunger, and like all hungers, it clouds judgment. Let us dissect it. First, there is the need for external confirmation. The villain, our foreman, does not trust his own sense of worth. It is tied to visible signs of dominance: the credit taken, the deference shown, the project completed ahead of schedule, however shoddy. Each of these is a hit of validation, a temporary relief from a deep-seated insecurity. This is why he cannot tolerate the protagonist's stillness. The protagonist's quiet competence, their lack of reaction, their focus on the work itself, does not feed this hunger, it denies it. It is a silent critique. The villain misreads this. He does not see it as strength or strategy. He sees it as a void, an emptiness where his expected tribute should be. This misreading is the first crack in his perception. Second, there is the psychology of momentum. For the villain, speed creates a feeling of control. When he moves quickly, issuing orders, changing plans, claiming results, he feels powerful. It is an addictive sensation. The rush of action masks the underlying chaos. Stopping, waiting, thinking, these feel like loss of control. They feel like vulnerability. So he must keep moving, keep consuming, keep producing visible outcomes. This momentum becomes a trap. It prevents him from seeing the details, from noticing the flaws in his own hasty constructions. He is always looking forward to the next quick win, never down at the foundations of the last one. Third, there is the fuel of frustration. The protagonist's patience is, to the villain, an irritant. It is a pebble in his shoe that he cannot shake out. His expectation was a confrontation he could win, or a surrender he could savor. He got neither. He got silence. And silence, to a mind addicted to noise and reaction, is maddening. This frustration begins to leak out. It shows in small, telling ways. A sharper tone when giving the protagonist a mundane task. A more blatant theft of credit for a piece of work. These are not signs of strength. They are signs of a growing itch he cannot scratch. He is trying to provoke the reaction he was denied, to force the conflict into a shape he understands. This is a critical weakness. He is revealing his hand. The protagonist, in their patient observation, notes all of this. They note the increased edge in his voice, the specific projects he now claims with extra bravado. They are gathering psychological data. They are learning what the villain needs and what he fears. The villain fears being ignored. He fears being revealed as unnecessary. He fears the quiet competence that makes his bluster look hollow. His greed, then, is not just for material things. It is for narrative control. He needs to be the hero of every story in the workshop, even if the story is a lie. The protagonist's existence, simply by being competent and quiet, threatens that narrative. This is the personal layer of the conflict, stripped to its bones. It is not about wood or tools. It is about two different ways of constructing a self. The villain constructs his self through external validation, seized quickly. The protagonist constructs their self through internal skill, built slowly. The villain's psychology cannot comprehend the protagonist's. He assumes everyone operates on his fuel. So he waits for them to crack, to demand recognition, to finally play the game. His mistake is believing the game is the only reality. The protagonist's patience allows them to see the game for what it is, a desperate performance. And in any performance, timing is everything. The villain, driven by his need for quick validation, will eventually mistime his entrance. He will overplay his hand. He will, in his frustration and hunger, reach for something too openly, too greedily, too quickly. He will do this because his psychology cannot tolerate the sustained tension of the protagonist's stillness. He must resolve it. He must force an ending. And in that forcing, he will choose speed over sense. He will rush. This analysis gives us the key. The trap is not something the protagonist builds from nothing. It is something the protagonist merely illuminates. The trap is the villain's own psychological wiring, his need for quick validation, his addiction to momentum, his frustration with silence. The protagonist's role is to understand that wiring so completely that they can predict exactly when and how the villain will short-circuit himself. They do not need to push him, they only need to not give him what he wants. They need to continue being the silent, competent, unmovable object. The villain's own momentum will do the rest. He will rush toward them, and in his rush, he will trip over the very obstacles he himself placed in his path, the shoddy work, the inflated claims, the brittle alliances. His psychology is the loaded spring. The protagonist's patience is simply the hand that knows when to release the catch. Let us now step into the villain's world, to feel its texture and smell its air. This is not the workshop as the protagonist knows it. This is the workshop as the foreman has shaped it through his haste. The atmosphere here is different. There is a constant, low-grade noise, the hollow clatter of tools being dropped carelessly, the slam of a drawer that doesn't quite fit its cabinet. The sound lacks the purposeful rhythm of skilled work. It is the sound of activity mistaken for productivity. The smell is not of clean wood and oil. It is a sour blend of stale coffee, of cheap adhesive that never quite cures properly, of dust kicked up from rushed sanding and left to hang in the air. Underneath it all, if you breathe deeply, is the faint, metallic scent of stress. The touch here is of cold, impersonal surfaces, the steel of the foreman's desk polished to a hard shine. The cheap laminate of the reports he generates, slick under the fingers. The rough, unfinished edges of projects hurried out the door, edges that snag on wool and skin. This is the sensory reality of a system built on speed. It is a world of surfaces with nothing solid beneath. The villain moves through this environment like a king in a castle of cards. He does not see the fragility, he sees only the height, the impressive silhouette. He hosts small, showy meetings at his desk. The sound is his voice, confident, layering jargon over gaps in understanding. The smell is the weak, floral scent of the air freshener he plugs in to mask the odors of neglect. The touch is the firm, brief handshake he offers to visitors, a performance of control. Look at the feast he has built. It is a feast of credit, of visible wins. The reports on his desk are thick, full of graphs that trend upward. They speak of efficiency gains, of cost savings, of deadlines met. But the materials that built those graphs are the warped wood, the skipped quality checks, the unpaid overtime he demanded. It is a feast that poisons those who consume its true ingredients. The workers are tired, their hands less steady, the tools are dull. The projects, once they leave the shop, will begin to whisper their shoddiness, a door that sticks in summer humidity, a drawer that sags, a joint that groans. But these whispers come later, for now, in the moment, the feast appears glorious. The villain gorges himself on it. He takes the credit, he accepts the praise from his own superiors who are also addicted to quick metrics. He feels the warm glow of validation. It is a hollow warmth, like the heat from a fire built with green wood, lots of smoke, little lasting heat. But it is enough for now. It feeds the hunger. This societal layer shows us the rot that impatience creates. It is not just a personal failing of the foreman, it is a cultural sickness. The system above him rewards the visible feast. It does not ask about the quality of the ingredients. It does not send inspectors to feel the drawers, to listen to the joints. It reads the reports. It sees the graphs. It says, "Well done." So the foreman's behavior is not an aberration. It is the logical output of a societal system that values speed over substance, appearance over integrity. He is a perfect product of his environment, and that is his tragedy. He cannot see that the very system that rewards him is also setting him up for a fall. Because systems built on rotten foundations eventually settle, the ground shifts, a major client complains, a delivered piece fails spectacularly. And awed, it questions the cost savings. When that happens, the system will not protect him. It will need a scapegoat. It will need someone who moved too quickly, who cut too many corners. And he will be there, his hands full of the cheap materials he ordered, his reports full of the promises he made. The protagonist, in their quiet corner, smells the rot. They feel the shoddiness in the tools they are forced to use. They hear the hollow sound of the foreman's boasts. They are living inside the villain's world, but they are not of it. They are like a canary in a coal mine, sensitive to the toxic air. Their relief chapter, their grounding, was in the scent of pine and beeswax. This chapter, the villain's world, is the relief's negative image. It is what they are resisting. It is the cold, slick, sour reality they must navigate without being corrupted. By showing us this world in all its sensory detail, we understand the stakes. The protagonist is not just fighting a person. They are holding a line against an entire way of being that is slowly eating itself from the inside. Their patience is a refusal to participate in the feast of sawdust. Their skill is the antidote to the poison. And their understanding of this rotten system is the map that will show them where it will collapse under its own weight. The trap is already set. It is the system itself. The villain is dancing on a floor he weakened with his own rushed construction. The protagonist is just waiting for the music to stop. Now we connect the dots. The villain's rushed actions and the systemic vulnerabilities they create are two sides of the same coin. His haste is not random. It is a direct response to the pressures and rewards of the system he operates within. And that same haste methodically weakens the system at its stress points. Let us trace the connections. First, the pressure for visible cost savings. The system rewards this with bonuses, with praise. The villain, needing quick validation, achieves it by sourcing cheap, warped wood. The systemic vulnerability created is material failure. The wood will twist, crack, or fail under stress, but the failure is not immediate, it is delayed. It manifests after the project is delivered, after the credit is taken. The system's oversight is geared toward immediate metrics, not long-term integrity. So the vulnerability remains, a ticking clock built into the furniture. Second, the pressure for fast project completion. The system celebrates met deadlines. The villain rushes the work, skipping quality checks, forcing overtime. The systemic vulnerability created is human error and burnout. The workers are tired, less careful. Mistakes are made, hidden, or patched over. Alliances within the team become brittle because trust erodes under unfair pressure. The system assumes consistent quality, but the rushed process guarantees inconsistency. The vulnerability is a network of small, hidden flaws and resentments. Third, the pressure for clear, simple reporting. The system demands data it can quickly digest. The villain's reports are full of optimistic projections and smoothed-over problems. The systemic vulnerability created is an information gap. The people above him making decisions are operating on a fiction. They do not know about the warped wood, the tired workers, the hidden mistakes. When a crisis hits, they will be blindsided. They will have no accurate map of the terrain. These connections are not accidents. They are the inevitable result of a system that incentivizes speed over sustainability. The villain is simply the agent who carries out these incentives to their logical, flawed conclusion. He does not see himself as creating vulnerabilities. He sees himself as succeeding within the rules he was given, and that is the precise mechanism of the trap. The trap is the system's own flawed logic, enacted with enthusiasm by the villain. The protagonist, through patient observation, has mapped these connections. They know which project used the bad wood. They know which deadline was met through exhausted, corner-cutting labor. They know where the report diverges from reality. They hold this map. They do not need to sabotage anything. They only need to wait for the system's logic to play out. They need to wait for the delayed failure, for the human error to surface, for the information gap to be revealed by events. Their role is to be the one person who is not surprised. Their role is to have the correct information ready at the right time, in the right form. This is the integration. The personal patience of the protagonist meets the systemic impatience of the villain, and the point of collision is the vulnerability. The villain's psychology demands he keep moving, keep consuming, keep reporting success. The system's design encourages this. But physics and human nature have other plans. Wood warps, tired people make mistakes, lies require maintenance. The protagonist's patience allows them to align with these slower, more fundamental truths. They are not fighting the system head-on. They are allowing the system's own internal contradictions to come to light. They are the witness. When the warped wood causes a cabinet door to split 6 months after delivery, the villain will need to explain. His instinct, shaped by the system, will be to move quickly, to blame the delivery, the humidity, the client's use, to produce another quick report that explains it away. But the protagonist has the original invoice for the substandard wood, the delivery note, perhaps even a sample. They have the timeline. They can show the direct connection between the cost-saving decision and the failure. They do this not with anger, but with calm, factual presentation. They use the system's own language, invoices, reports, specifications, to reveal the truth the system tried to ignore. This is the fight with their trade. Their trade is not just woodworking. Their trade, honed through patience, is forensic understanding. It is the ability to reconstruct the chain of cause and effect that everyone else was too busy to notice. The trap, then, is already sprung. It was sprung the moment the villain ordered the cheap wood to get a quick win. The protagonist's patience is merely the mechanism that allows the trap to close at the optimal moment. When the villain's momentum is greatest and his attention is elsewhere, the connections are clear. Haste creates systemic vulnerabilities. Patience allows for their documentation and understanding. The system, by rewarding haste, creates the conditions for its own correction, but only if someone is patient enough to do the correcting. The moment arrives, the villain returns, but he was never truly gone. He was always present, a constant pressure in the system. His return is not a physical arrival from a distant land, it is an escalation. He now wants not just the credit for the protagonist's past work, but the very value they have built within the system, their reputation for quiet competence. The respect of the old joiner, the tangible quality of the cabinet they made, the forensic map of the workshop's operations they hold in their mind. He wants to harvest the orchard they tended in silence. This is the systemic conflict made manifest. It is extraction versus cultivated value. The foreman calls the protagonist into his office. The air here is different from the workshop. It is still artificially cool from a vent, and carries the faint, sweet smell of the air freshener, trying to mask something stale. The sound is the low hum of electronics, the tap of a pen on the desk. The touch is the cold, fake leather of the guest chair. The foreman does not shout. He speaks with a calibrated reasonableness. He outlines a new opportunity. A high-profile project has landed. It is for an important client. It must be perfect. It must be done quickly. He wants the protagonist to lead it. This seems, on the surface, like a reward. It is the opposite. It is a claim. He is saying, your skill, which I have ignored and stolen from, is now needed to cover for my systemic failures. Your competence will be used to validate my rushed, shoddy overall management. If you succeed, the credit will be his, for his vision in assigning you. If you fail, the blame will be yours, for not meeting the impossible standard. He is attempting to co-opt the very thing that made you survive, your skill, and turn it into a tool for his own further validation. He wants to own your hands. This is the cruelty refined. It is not withholding bread. It is demanding you bake a feast with sawdust and then present it as your masterpiece. The protagonist listens. They feel the old pressure to react, to refuse, to argue, but they have been patient for too long. They have studied this man, this system. They see the trap within the offer. If they refuse outright, they will be labeled as uncooperative, as not a team player. The system will side with the foreman. If they accept without conditions, they will be consumed, their skill used to prop up the rotten structure a little longer. They need a third way. They need to use their trade. Their trade is not just woodworking. It is the trade of careful measurement, of understanding forces and tolerances. They look at the project specifications the foreman slides across the desk. They are vague, full of grand promises, but light on practical details. They are designed to be unimpeachable in a meeting and impossible to execute in the workshop. This is the villain's language. The protagonist speaks a different language, the language of specifics. They ask questions, calm, precise questions. What are the exact dimensions? What is the wood species specified? What is the budget for materials? What is the timeline for client approvals? Each question is a needle. It punctures the vague, inflated balloon of the project. The foreman becomes visibly uncomfortable. He does not have the answers. He expected either grateful acceptance or angry refusal. He did not expect a patient, systematic interrogation of the plan's feasibility. This is the first skirmish fought with their trade. They are not fighting the man. They are fighting the shoddiness of his planning. They are applying the standard of their craft, clarity, specificity, honesty about constraints, to his world of blurry promises. The foreman's frustration, which we analyzed earlier, begins to surface. His tone becomes sharper. He says things like, "Don't get bogged down in details," and "We need to show momentum." These are the incantations of the haste-addicted system. The protagonist notes them. They are data. The societal layer of this conflict is clear. The foreman represents the extractive model: take value, don't build it. The protagonist represents the cultivative model: build value through slow, careful work. The system, at this moment, is trying to force the cultivator to serve the extractor. The protagonist's resistance is not a personal rebellion. It is a defense of a different economic and ethical principle. They are saying through their questions that real value cannot be rushed, that quality has a timeline, that promises must be grounded in reality. This is a dangerous thing to say in a system that runs on fiction, but the protagonist has a shield. Their shield is their documented understanding of the system's vulnerabilities. They know this our project will likely require materials the cheap supplier cannot provide. They know the timeline is impossible without the corner cutting that has weakened past projects. They are not just asking questions. They are subtly pointing to the cracks in the foundation. They are forcing the foreman to either acknowledge those cracks, which would undermine his own past reports, or to ignore them and push ahead, which increases the risk of a catastrophic, visible failure. This is the return and the conflict reframed. The villain wants what the protagonist has built: their competence, their reputation for integrity. The protagonist's defense is to insist that the villain also accept the conditions that created that value: patience, specificity, honesty. They know he cannot accept those conditions. His psychology and his position in the system forbid it, so the conflict is set. It is a conflict between two irreconcilable ways of working. And the stage for the final trap is now being measured, not with a sword, but with a ruler and a set of precise, uncomfortable questions. The protagonist leaves the foreman's office. The air in the workshop feels different now. It is charged. The scent of pine and oil is still there, but it is now layered with the sharp, electric smell of impending conflict. This is the core storytelling chapter, the trap. The protagonist does not rage. They do not plot vengeance. They go to their bench. They touch the cool, smooth surface of the cabinet they built. They open a drawer, hearing the perfect, muted slide of wood on wood. This is their center. This is what they are defending. They begin to work, but the work is different now. It is the work of the trap. They are using their trade. First, they draft a document. It is not an accusation. It is a project plan. It takes the vague specifications from the foreman and translates them into the language of their craft. It lists every material required with exact grades and quantities. It includes a realistic timeline with stages for client approval. It has a budget that accounts for quality materials, not the warped wood from the cheap supplier. It is a document of pure, uncompromising competence. It is a garment woven with hidden weaknesses, but the weaknesses are not in the garment. They are in the foreman's ability to provide what the plan honestly requires. The protagonist submits the plan. They do it quietly through the proper channel. They copy the old joiner, whose silent witness now carries weight. The foreman receives it, he reads it, he feels the trap closing. The plan is flawless. To reject it would be to admit he does not want a quality project. To accept it would be to commit to spending real money, to using good materials, to a timeline that allows for proper work. It would expose his past cost, saving as fraud. It would force him to operate in the protagonist's world of specificity and care, a world he has spent years avoiding. His instinct, his psychology, his entire mode of operation is to rush. To say yes quickly to show decisiveness, and then cut corners later to meet the impossible promises. But this plan is a contract. It is specific. If he agrees to it and then cuts corners, the deviation will be documented, measurable. The protagonist has built a cage of clarity. The foreman hesitates. This hesitation is itself a victory. The protagonist has slowed him down. They have forced him to think, to confront the reality of the work, not just the appearance of it. But the foreman's hunger for validation is too great. The high-profile client is waiting. He needs a win. He cannot show weakness, so he does what he always does. He moves quickly. He approves the plan, but with a verbal addendum. Make it work, he says. Use your initiative. We need to be flexible. These are the magic words of the hasty system. They are meant to give him deniability later. They are the poison in the feast. The protagonist nods. They have what they need. A written, approved plan that specifies quality and a verbal instruction that contradicts it. They now begin the physical work, but they work slowly, meticulously, exactly to the approved plan. They order the good wood, they log the order. They begin the joinery, each cut precise. They are building two things. They are building the project, and they are building a record. A record of doing everything right, according to the standards the foreman himself approved. Meanwhile, the foreman's pressure builds. The client asks for updates. The timeline in the plan is honest, but it is not fast enough for his need for a quick victory. He starts to interfere. He asks why they are using such expensive wood. He suggests they switch to the cheaper supplier to save time. He pushes to skip a drying stage. Each of these suggestions is a deviation from the approved plan. Each is a potential crack. The protagonist documents everyone, a note in a log, a saved email. A quiet witness from the old joiner who hears the foreman's rushed suggestions. The trap is now fully set. Its mechanism is the conflict between the written standard and the foreman's ingrained habit of haste. The protagonist is merely holding up the standard, like a mirror. The foreman, compelled by his own nature, will rush towards the reflection and smash into the glass. The sensory details here are crucial. The smell is the clean scent of the good oak, the sharp tang of the high-quality glue. The touch is the perfect fit of a hand, cut dovetail, snug and strong. The sound is the steady, unhurried rhythm of the mallet and chisel. This is the protagonist's world. They are working within it, calmly, while the foreman's world of haste and pressure swirls around them, unable to penetrate the circle of their focus. The trap is not a trick. It is integrity itself, presented as a choice. The foreman can either rise to it, which would require a change in his entire being, or he can break against it. His psychology, his position in the system, all his past choices, make the second option inevitable. He will break, and he will do it in a way that leaves his fingerprints all over the broken pieces. The protagonist's fight is almost over. They have used their trade to create a situation where justice is not something they impose, but something the foreman chooses for himself. Through his own actions, in full view of the standards he agreed to. The feast is prepared. It is a feast of honest work. The foreman is about to poison it with his own hands. Now we integrate this specific trap with the long memory of human conflict. The protagonist's strategy is not new. It is a thread in a vast historical tapestry. Consider the legal reforms that took centuries. They were not won by sudden, violent revolutions alone. They were won by the slow, patient accumulation of cases, of precedents, of arguments that exposed the contradictions in the old laws. Lawyers and activists played the long game. They gathered information. They built records. They waited for the right moment, the right defendant, the right judge. They used the system's own rules to change the system. This is justice through patience. Or consider economic corrections. The market speculator who buys on rumor and sells in panic often loses to the investor who studies the fundamentals, who understands the business, who waits out the noise. The crash of 2008 was not an accident. It was the result of a system that rewarded speed and complexity over understanding and durability. The ones who moved too quickly were ruined. The ones who had been patient, who had seen the rot in the mortgage-backed securities, were positioned to survive and even to help rebuild on firmer ground. The fall of empires follows this pattern. Rome did not fall in a day. It decayed from within, through corruption, through overextension, through the erosion of the very virtues that built it. The barbarians at the gate were merely the final push. The real collapse was in the quality of the roads, the integrity of the currency, the loyalty of the legions, all things that were sacrificed for quick political wins, for lavish games, for the appearance of endless power. The patient observers, the historians, the administrators in the provinces, they saw it coming. They could not stop it, but they understood its mechanics. Our workshop story is a miniature of these grand historical processes. The foreman is the empire in decay. His quick claims are the debased currency. His shoddy projects are the crumbling roads. His brittle alliances are the disloyal legions. The protagonist is the patient observer, the one who keeps the records, who maintains the standard, who understands that the collapse is inevitable not because of some external enemy, but because of internal contradictions. The trap the protagonist set is a historical mechanism. It is the mechanism of accountability. In societies without strong formal justice, folk justice emerged. It often took the form of the villain being hoist with his own petard, the thief falling into his own trap, the liar being caught in his own web of stories. This is not poetic justice, it is systemic justice. It is the system of cause and effect, of action and consequence, reasserting itself when human institutions fail. The protagonist has merely aligned themselves with this deeper system. They have not created the consequence, they have merely refused to interrupt it. They have refused to be the distraction, the scapegoat, the quick fix that allows the foreman to avoid the consequences of his own actions for a little longer. By working to the approved plan, by documenting the deviations, they are ensuring that when the consequence arrives, it lands on the correct doorstep. This integration connects the personal to the historical. The pressure you feel to fix an unfair situation quickly is the same pressure that has led to countless bad treaties, rushed investments, and failed social policies throughout history. The folk wisdom in the tales is the collective memory saying, wait, let the situation reveal itself. Let the villain's own momentum carry him to his end. In the historical layer, patience is not a personal virtue. It is a survival strategy for civilizations. Cultures that could plan for the next harvest, the next generation, the next century, outlasted those that lived for the next raid, the next tribute, the next season's glory. The protagonist in their small workshop is enacting this civilizational wisdom. They are planning for the next project, the next standard, the next truth, while the foreman is raiding for the next credit, the next quick win. The conflict is archetypal. It is the planter versus the plunderer. History's long arc suggests the planter usually wins if they can survive the plunderer's initial raids. That survival requires patience. It requires the information gathering that lets you see the raider's patterns, his weaknesses, the moment his greed has overextended him. The protagonist has done all that. Now they are in the final stage, where the historical pattern completes itself. The foreman, driven by his need for a quick, visible victory, will make his decisive error. He will overreach in a way that cannot be hidden, cannot be explained away by jargon, cannot be blamed on the protagonist's slow work. He will do it because his historical role is to be the agent of his own downfall. The protagonist's role is to be the witness who ensures the record is clear. This integration should offer a strange comfort. Your personal struggle in an unfair system is not isolated. It is a modern instance of an ancient dynamic. The tools available to you, patience, observation, meticulous record keeping, steadfast adherence to your own standards, are the same tools that have corrected imbalances for millennia. They are slow tools, they are not dramatic. But they have a weight that haste can never match. They are the weight of history, of cause and effect, of the simple truth that what is built on sand cannot stand. The protagonist is not alone. They are standing on the shoulders of every patient soul who ever outlasted a tyrant, every careful craftsman who ever refused to cut a corner. Every quiet truth teller who ever waited for the lie to exhaust itself. The trap is sprung. It was sprung the day the foreman chose speed over substance. The protagonist is just the one who remembered to watch. The collapse begins not with a bang but with a splinter. The high-profile project is nearing its promised delivery date. The protagonist has built the core structure to the exacting standards of their approved plan. It is solid, beautiful, a testament to patient skill. But the foreman's pressure has been relentless. A week before delivery, he makes his move. He cannot tolerate the project being merely good and on time according to the honest timeline. He needs it to be early. He needs a spectacular win. So he issues a rushed order. He tells the protagonist to install decorative panels on the exterior. They are complex, ornate carvings. They were not in the original plan. They will require another craftsman, a specialist, and days of careful work. There is no time. The foreman, in his haste, has already promised them to the client in a flashy update, taking credit for the added value. He has not consulted the protagonist. He has not checked if it is possible. He has moved, as always, quickly. This is the overreach. This is the moment his greed for validation outruns the reality of the workshop's capabilities. The protagonist receives the order. They look at the specifications for the panels. They are to be made from a delicate, expensive wood. The only supplier who carries it is not their usual cheap one. The lead time is 10 days. The foreman wants them installed in 3. The systemic flaw is now glaring. The foreman's habit of making promises without checking resources has finally collided with a promise too big to hide. The protagonist does not panic. They do not refuse. They follow the system. They submit a request for the special wood, noting the lead time. They copy the foreman and the old joiner. They highlight the discrepancy between the request and the demanded timeline. This is not an attack. It is a simple, factual report. It is the sound of a gear grinding where it should not. The foreman, receiving this, is cornered. His need for a quick victory is now in direct conflict with the physical laws of supply and craftsmanship. He cannot admit his promise was a lie, so he does what his psychology dictates. He doubles down, he rushes. He tells the protagonist to use a substitute wood, something that looks similar from a distance. He says to do the carvings quickly, to simplify the design. He is asking for a forgery. He is asking the protagonist to compromise the very integrity that has been their shield. This is the critical moment. The protagonist says no, not with anger but with clarity. They point to the approved project plan, which specifies materials and quality standards. They point to their earlier note about the lead time. They say, calmly, that they cannot produce quality work with the wrong materials in the time given. They offer a solution. They can deliver the core project, which is excellent, on the original timeline. The decorative panels can be added later, as a separate phase with proper planning. This is the reasonable, professional response. It is also a death sentence for the foreman's narrative of control. He cannot accept it. Acceptance would mean admitting he made a mistake, that he overpromised, that he does not have the mastery he claims. His entire identity, his position, is built on the fiction that he can always deliver the quick win, so he explodes. Not at the client, not at the situation, but at the protagonist. He accuses them of sabotage, of being slow, of not being a team player. His voice rises. The sound carries through the workshop. The other workers hear. The old joiner hears. The foreman is revealing himself. He is showing that his authority is not based on competence, but on bluster and fear. In his rage, he makes his fatal error. He says, "Just make it work with what we have. I don't care how. I approved the cheaper wood weeks ago for the main structure anyway. Use that. This is the confession." He has just admitted in front of witnesses that he authorized a deviation from the quality standards of the approved plan. He has admitted to the systemic fraud the protagonist has been documenting. The protagonist says nothing, they simply look at him. Their silence is now a weapon. It is the silence of the record, of the facts, of the timeline that does not lie. The foreman, seeing that silence, realizes what he has said. The blood drains from his face, the smell in the office changes. The sweet air freshener cannot mask the sudden, sour scent of panic. The collapse is now inevitable. It is no longer about the decorative panels. It is about the lie at the center of his management. The protagonist has not pushed him over the edge. They have merely held up a mirror to the edge he was already sprinting toward. The foreman's own momentum, his need for speed, his greed for validation, has carried him to a point where his words have undone him. The systemic analysis of this collapse is precise. The villain destroyed himself through a sequence of systemic flaws he himself created. The pressure for visible wins created the overpromise. The habit of rushed decisions created the impossible timeline. The reliance on cheap materials created the resource shortage. The inability to tolerate contradiction created the public outburst. And the need to blame others created the self-incriminating confession. Each step was a logical consequence of the previous one, given his psychology and the system that rewarded it. The protagonist's role was to understand this sequence so completely that they could stand at the right point with the right information and let the sequence play out. They did not fight, they illuminated, and in that light the villain's own shadow consumed him. The fall is not yet complete. There are still repercussions, explanations, meetings, but the structural integrity of the foreman's position is gone. It has splintered like the cheap wood he insisted on using. The sound of that splinter is not loud. It is the quiet, final click of a trap closing. A trap built from his own rushed choices and sprung by his own panicked words. In the days that follow, the workshop changes, the air slowly clears. The constant low-grade noise of panic and rushed activity begins to fade. It is replaced by a different sound, the sound of work. Not the frantic clatter, but the steady, purposeful sounds that were always there in the protagonist's corner, now spreading. The smell of sour stress and cheap adhesive gradually dissipates, overpowered by the returning sense of fresh wood shavings and linseed oil. The touch is of tools being handled with care, of surfaces being checked for true. This is the aftermath. Not a celebration, but a quiet restoration of balance. The foreman is gone. Not in a dramatic firing, but in a series of hushed meetings, of reviews, of the system above finally examining the cracks he could no longer plaster over. The protagonist's documented timeline, their notes, the witness of the old joiner, all become part of the record. They are not presented as a weapon, but as simple facts in an investigation. The system, when forced to look, sees the pattern. The cheap wood, the missed deadlines on other projects now coming to light, the low morale, the foreman's own confession in the office is the keystone. He is removed. There is no villainous monologue, no final confrontation. There is just an empty desk one morning, and a new, temporary manager from another department who asks sensible questions and listens to the answers. The protagonist does not take his place. That is not the point. The point is that the space he poisoned is now breathable again. The old joiner comes over to the protagonist's bench. He does not smile, he nods. He places a hand on the finished core of the high-profile project, feeling the joinery. "Good," he says, the single word carrying the weight of a lifetime's standards. This is the helper's reward. It is the restoration of a world where that word means something. The protagonist continues their work. They complete the project to the original, honest plan. It is delivered, solid and beautiful. The client is pleased. The credit this time flows where it should, but the real victory is not the credit, it is the quiet in the workshop. It is the sound of people talking about the work again, not about politics or fear. It is the smell of honest sweat and good materials. It is the touch of a well-maintained tool returned to its proper place in the cabinet. This societal relief shows us what peace restored through wisdom looks like on the ground. It is not a party. It is the absence of a certain kind of tension. It is the space to do good work without looking over your shoulder. It is the knowledge that the system, however imperfect, can still correct itself when presented with clear evidence of its own failures. The feast of sawdust is over. Now there is simple, good bread, the kind that nourishes. The protagonist's cabinet, the one they built as an act of defiance, now stands not as a secret refuge, but as an open example. Others come to look at it, to feel the draw pulls, to understand what is possible. The standard has been made visible. It is no longer hidden in a corner. This is how cultures heal, not through grand pronouncements, but through the slow, patient raising of standards in everyday practice. One person holds the line, others see that it can be held. They remember that they too know how to do good work. They begin to do it. The societal rot that the foreman represented, the valuing of speed over substance, of appearance over integrity, is not eradicated. It is a constant pressure. But in this specific place, for now, it has been pushed back. A space has been cleared. In that space, different rules apply, the rules of the craft. The rules of patience, the rules of speaking the truth about wood and time. This chapter is an anchor. It brings us back to the senses, to the physical reality of a world made slightly better. It is the reward for enduring the psychological pressure, for doing the systemic analysis, for setting the trap with integrity. The reward is not power or wealth. It is the smell of clean wood. It is the sound of a well-tuned plane. It is the warmth of the exotic wood draw pull in your hand, shaped by your own skill and given by a friend. It is the knowledge that you did not break. You did not become like him. You waited, you watched, you understood, and in the end your understanding was the stone on which his haste shattered. The peace that follows is the quiet after a storm has passed. The air is clean, the ground is solid. And you are still standing at your bench, your hands steady, ready for the next piece of work. Now we bring the story's logic home to you. The modern pressure to act fast in an unfair situation is not just a workplace annoyance. It is a physiological and psychological trap, and the protagonist's journey is a map for escaping it. Let us connect the dots to your life. When you are wronged, your body reacts. Adrenaline floods your system, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense. This is the ancient fight or flight response. It screams for action. In the modern world, this often translates to sending the angry email, making the confrontational call, quitting in a blaze of righteous fury, or conversely, collapsing into anxious paralysis. Both are forms of rushing, both are playing the game on the villain's terms. The protagonist's strategy offers a third path. It begins with recognizing that physiological alarm for what it is: data. It is your system telling you there is a threat. Your first job is not to eliminate the threat immediately. Your first job is to understand it. This requires a deliberate override. You must take a breath. You must feel the pressure, the tightening in your chest, and then you must choose consciously to not let it dictate your next move. This is incredibly difficult. It feels like inaction. It feels like you are letting them win. But reframe it: you are not letting them win. You are refusing to let them control your internal state. You are reclaiming your own timeline. The delay, the pause, the period of observation is not fear, it is information gathering. It is the equivalent of the protagonist feeling the grain of the wood, listening to the rhythms of the workshop, mapping the resource flows. In your situation, what does this look like? It means you do not respond to the provoking email for 24 hours. You sleep on it. It means you start a private document, a log. You write down what happened factually without emotion. You note dates, times, what was said. You save relevant emails and files. You are not building a lawsuit yet. You are building an understanding. You are conducting your audit. You are asking yourself questions. What does this person actually want? Is it credit? Is it control? Is it to provoke me into a mistake? What systems are at play here? The company culture, the financial pressures, the hierarchy. Who are the potential allies, the old joiners in your world, the people who value substance over speed? This work is slow. It is cognitive. It happens in your mind and in your notes. It is not visible to the villain, and that is its power. While they are waiting for your emotional reaction, you are gathering intelligence. You are learning their patterns. You are identifying the cracks in their position. This reframes your entire experience of the injustice. You are no longer just a victim enduring a wrong. You are an investigator building a case. You are a strategist studying the terrain. This shift in identity is everything. It gives you agency in the one place no one can take it from you, your own mind. The pressure to rush is then exposed as a tool of the unfair system. It is designed to make you act before you have the full picture, to make you emotional, to make you predictable. By choosing patience, you are disarming that tool. You are saying, I will not be predictable. I will move when I have enough information, when I understand the system well enough to know which move will actually matter. This does not guarantee victory. Sometimes the system is too corrupt, the villain too entrenched. But it guarantees that you will not defeat yourself. You will not provide the excuse they need to marginalize you further. You will not burn a bridge in anger that you might need later. You will keep your options open. And in many cases, as the story shows, the villain's own need for speed will create the opportunity for their undoing. Your patience allows you to see that opportunity when it arises, and to be ready with the facts, the calm response, the documented timeline. This is the personal integration. The fairy tale logic is a practical psychology for modern survival. Your delays, your pauses, your periods of what looks like inaction can be recast as the most strategic action of all, the action of learning. The next time you feel that pressure to act fast, remember the workshop. Remember the smell of the good wood, the sound of the steady mallet. Remember that the villain's greatest mistake was believing you would rush. Your greatest strength can be the decision to prove them wrong, not with confrontation, but with the quiet, powerful, patient gathering of understanding. We arrive at the final analytical synthesis. Why, across diverse cultures and millennia, did folk wisdom consistently encode patience as a survival tool for the powerless? The answer lies in the fundamental asymmetry of power. The powerful have resources, authority, and often the first move. The powerless have time, attention, and often a deeper need to understand their environment. Folk tales are not moral fables about being good. They are technical manuals for navigating this asymmetry. They teach that when you cannot match force with force, you must match it with foresight. When you cannot control the narrative, you must become a master of the subtext. When you cannot win in a sprint, you must prepare for a marathon. The villain's speed is his advantage in the short term, but it is his vulnerability in the long term. Speed requires constant fuel, new victories, new validations, new resources to consume. It creates a metabolic rate that cannot be sustained. It forces errors. It leaves a trail. Patience, by contrast, has a low metabolic rate. It conserves energy. It allows for learning. It turns the very act of waiting into a form of accumulation, of knowledge, of skill, of alliances. The folk tale that punishes the hasty brother and rewards the patient one is not about virtue, it is about thermodynamics. Haste burns bright and fast. Patience burns slow and long. In a contest of endurance, the slow burn wins. These tales also reveal a deep insight into systemic engagement. The powerless are often inside the system that oppresses them. They cannot simply leave. They must operate within it. The tales provide a blueprint for internal resistance. Not the resistance of open rebellion, which is often suicide, but the resistance of subtle subversion. The resistance of doing your work well, of remembering the truth, of building quiet alliances, of understanding the rules better than the rule makers. This is how the powerless defeat the powerful, not by overthrowing them, but by outlasting them, by being the still point when their world spins out of control, by being the one who knows where the bodies are buried because you watch them dig the graves. The historical layer confirms this. Civilizations that prized patience in agriculture, in governance, in craft endured. Those that prized conquest and quick glory often flamed out. The folk memory encoded this not in history books, but in stories about third sons and clever animals, because those were the vehicles that could travel across generations. Through fires and famines and illiteracy, they were the backup hard drive of human survival strategy. Our workshop story is a modern translation of this ancient code. The foreman is the powerful but brittle system. The protagonist is the powerless but durable individual. The victory is not a change in regime, but a correction within the existing system. The system itself is forced to eject a faulty component because the component's failures were made undeniable by the patient record, keeping of the one it tried to ignore. This reveals the ultimate purpose of these tales. They are not about creating heroes. They are about creating competent survivors. They are about training the mind to resist the seductive, dangerous call of haste. They are about teaching that your greatest weapon in an unfair fight is your own disciplined perception. You must see more, remember more, and understand more than the person who is trying to rush you. This final analysis brings us to the core question. Why did folk justice reward patience? Because patience is the primary tool for gathering the information necessary for justice to even be possible. In a world without forensics, without whistleblower protections, without fair courts, information was everything, and information favors the patient observer. The one who watches the same scene every day notices the pattern. The one who listens hears the lie repeated. The one who feels the wood knows which piece is warped. Justice in such a world is not delivered by an authority. It emerges from the accumulated weight of revealed truth. The villain's rush is the force that finally makes the truth visible to everyone. The protagonist's patience is the lens that focuses it. So the story is a manual for turning the pressure of injustice into the power of observation, a manual for using delay as a strategic asset, a manual for understanding that in the long game between haste and patience, between extraction and cultivation, between the quick harvest and the slow root, the deeper logic of survival has always favored the root. The root is what remains when the storm has passed. The root is what gathers water in secret. The root is what breaks stone. This is the wisdom the old tales carried. It is not a comforting fantasy. It is a hard, practical truth for anyone who has ever felt powerless. Your patience is not passivity, it is your root system. Tend it, trust it, let it gather what you need. And in time, it will find the cracks in the stone above you. The workshop in the morning light, the high windows cast long, clean rectangles on the floorboards swept free of dust. The air carries the scent of oak and beeswax. The protagonist stands at their bench. Their hands rest on the smooth wood. They are sharpening a chisel. The sound is a slow, rhythmic scrape on the oilstone, a sound like a breath being drawn. The old joiner is at his own bench, fitting a piece of walnut into a vise. His movements are deliberate. The temporary manager is in the office, speaking quietly on the phone about schedules and materials. The sound is measured, factual. The cabinet the protagonist built stands against the wall. Its doors are closed. The drawer pulls, carved from the dark wood the old joiner gave, catch the light. They look warm. The tools inside are arranged in order. The project for the important client was delivered. There was a note of thanks. It mentioned the quality of the joinery. The protagonist placed the note in the drawer of the cabinet. They did not show it to anyone. The foreman's desk is empty. The air freshener is unplugged. The window behind it is open a crack. A slight breeze moves through, carrying the distant smell of rain on pavement. It mixes with the smell of the wood. The protagonist finishes sharpening the chisel. They hold it up, sighting along the edge against the light. It is a clean, straight line. They set it down on the bench. They select a piece of maple. They run a hand over its surface. It is cool, the grain is tight. They pick up a pencil. They begin to mark a line. The sound of the pencil is a soft scratch. Outside, the city moves, cars pass, people talk on phones. Somewhere, someone is rushing. Someone is making a promise they cannot keep. Someone is feeling the pressure in their chest. In here, there is the line being drawn. There is the feel of the wood. There is the smell of the oil. There is the next cut, and the one after that. The work continues. The rhythm is slow. It is the rhythm of a heart that has learned to beat steadily in the silence. The protagonist makes the first cut. The mallet strikes the chisel. The sound is clear. A thin curl of wood peels away. It falls to the bench. It smells of maple. The piece is begun.